I don't know what kind of woman I am anymore. The kind who laughs at her husband's quirks, or the kind who suddenly realizes those quirks have been quietly consuming 3 years of her marriage. It started so stupidly, so ordinary. My laptop had died. Nothing dramatic, just the blue screen of death after one too many ignored updates. My husband, bless him, had left his MacBook on the coffee table, still warm, half open, humming with the lazy confidence of a machine that belonged to someone with nothing to hide. I should have known better. I should have respected the unspoken rule of marriage: don't snoop if you want to keep the illusion intact. But when I saw Reddit glowing on the screen, logged into his account, I felt that wicked tug of curiosity. Like touching a bruise just to see if it still hurts. At first, it was innocent. A few subreddits I expected, NBA, tech gadgets, some random home improvement threads. But then I noticed something strange, almost absurd. A username I didn't recognize attached to posts written in a voice that couldn't possibly be his. Human forgot to feed me today. Vengeance will be swift. Time to knock glass from high place. I froze. Reread the sentence. And then another. And another. It wasn't just one silly post. It was hundreds, thousands, a pattern stretching back years. My husband, my 30-year-old husband, had been role-playing as a cat online. Not ironically, not as a one-off joke. Consistently, meticulously, for 3 goddamn years. The account was called Mr. Whiskers_official. Thousands of followers. Gold awards. A community of people who responded as if they, too, were feline overlords trapped in human households. And the worst part? He was good at it. Like disturbingly good. Every post purred with personality, claws sharpened on wit and sass. I kept scrolling, my stomach twisting. He wasn't just posting memes. He had entire storylines, rivalries, feuds. He fought with other cat accounts over territory and brands of kibble. There were threads of people cheering him on, others booing him like he was some kind of digital gladiator in a coliseum made of scratching posts. And then I found it. His nemesis. Sir Pounce-a-Lot. A dignified tuxedo cat with a superiority complex. Together, they waged war in comment sections like medieval knights. Except instead of swords, they wielded gifs of shredded toilet paper and sardonic meows. Their rivalry had grown so legendary that people had begun writing fanfiction in the comments. Entire sagas of betrayal, love, triangles, and imaginary battles fought on kitchen countertops. My husband, the man I shared a bed with, the man who forgot to put his socks in the hamper, was living a double life as the internet's favorite snarky British shorthair. And, apparently, he had enemies. I stared at the glowing screen, my pulse hammering. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly knocked over the coffee mug beside me. I couldn't stop picturing him at night, hunched over the keyboard, not doing work, not gaming, but crafting elaborate monologues as a cat plotting vengeance against humans who forgot to refill his food bowl. And the comments? God, the comments. People adored him, called him the best cat on Reddit, quoted his lines, begged for updates. They thought he was clever, funny, original. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my own kitchen, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the feline celebrity he had, apparently, become. When the front door creaked open and I heard his familiar footsteps, I slammed the laptop shut so hard it rattled. My heart was in my throat. Suddenly, every normal detail of him, the jingle of his keys, the sigh he gave as he hung his coat, felt alien, suspicious. Because I knew. I knew my husband wasn't just my husband anymore. He was Mr. Whiskers. And I had no idea what to do with that. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The man snoring softly beside me wasn't just my husband anymore. He was also a virtual British short-hair cat with a dedicated fan base and an ongoing feud with a tuxedoed nemesis. Every time he shifted under the covers, I imagined claws flexing, tail flicking, eyes glowing in the dark. The curiosity was unbearable. By 3 a.m, I gave up pretending to rest. I slipped out of bed like a thief, padded barefoot into the living room, and opened his laptop again. And down the rabbit hole I fell. At first, I thought maybe I'd find a handful of silly posts, something I could brush off as harmless fun, but the deeper I dug, the worse it got. This wasn't a hobby. This was a life. My husband hadn't just written 1 or 2 cat jokes. He'd built an entire universe. There were daily updates written in the voice of Mr. Whiskers, sarcastic monologues about how his human servants were incompetent, dramatic retellings of spilled water glasses framed as deliberate acts of rebellion. He described the world through feline eyes, the tyranny of closed doors, the thrill of laser pointers, the suspicious nature of cucumbers. And people loved it. His posts had thousands of upvotes, streams of comments filled with laughing emojis and cries of, "So true, my cat does the same thing." Some fans even made fan art of Mr. Whiskers, doodles of a smug gray cat wearing a crown, memes captioned with his most popular one-liners. But it didn't stop there. He had lore, actual lore. Threads stretching back months told stories of Mr. Whiskers' noble lineage, his bitter rivalries, his victories and defeats. He had alliances with other role players, full-fledged cat councils where they discussed turf wars and kibble politics like it was Westeros, except fluffier. I clicked on one thread labeled The Battle of the Balcony, and my jaw dropped. It was an epic saga written in multiple parts. Mr. Whiskers had supposedly dueled Sir Pounce-a-Lot after catching him trespassing on his sunlit domain. The comments were insane, dozens of people cheering them on like it was a pay-per-view boxing match. And my husband, my quiet, sometimes awkward husband, was at the center of it all. He was famous. Not to the world at large, but to a niche community who believed in him, adored him, and feared him. He was Mr. Whiskers, feared warlord, cunning strategist, sassy overlord of the living room. I should have closed the laptop and walked away. But instead, I kept scrolling, hungry, desperate, unable to stop. That's when I found the fan fiction. Entire paragraphs written by strangers imagining dramatic confrontations between Mr. Whiskers and Sir Pounce-a-Lot. Betrayals, secret alliances, even a love triangle with a calico named Duchess Furrington. Some of it was lighthearted, but some was unsettling, overly detailed, weirdly passionate. My husband was the star of someone else's fantasy world. The clock crept toward dawn as I devoured every post, every comment, every meme. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the walls in pale gold, my head throbbed with exhaustion and disbelief. And the sickest part? A tiny voice inside me whispered, "He's actually brilliant." Because he was. His writing was sharp, funny, painfully observant. He captured the essence of Katniss so perfectly it almost scared me. Maybe I should have been proud. Maybe I should have admired his creativity, his persistence, his secret internet fame. But all I felt was betrayal. Not because he roleplayed as a cat, but because he never told me. As if there were two husbands. The one who forgot to pick up milk, who fell asleep during movies, who scratched his beard absent-mindedly while paying bills. And the other, the one I didn't know at all, who ruled an empire of whiskers and wit online, who had enemies and allies and fans who worshipped him. I closed the laptop, my eyes burning, my heart heavier than it had ever been. Because the truth was undeniable now. My husband didn't just live with me, he lived a second life. And I wasn't sure which one mattered more to him. Sir Pounce-a-Lot. Even the name made my stomach twist. Dramatic, regal, infuriatingly pompous. He was everything Mr. Whiskers was not. Formal where my husband was sarcastic, polished where my husband was scrappy. If Mr. Whiskers was the anti-hero of this furry Shakespearean drama, Sir Pounce-a-Lot was the overzealous knight, obsessed with honor, propriety, and protecting his sovereign kibble stores. I clicked into one of their infamous exchanges. It started with a photo someone had posted of a cat lounging on a windowsill. My husband, as Mr. Whiskers, had commented, "The throne of sunlight belongs to me alone. Intruders shall be cast into shadow." To which Sir Pounce-a-Lot replied, "You mistake delusion for dominion, Whiskers. The sun shines for all noble cats, not just one tyrant nursing his ego." The thread exploded. Dozens of users jumped in, cheering, booing, writing their own alliance speeches. It was chaos. Organized chaos, and people were hooked. Scrolling through more battles, I realized this wasn't just casual bickering. It was epic theater. There were references to past duels, to betrayals, to stolen treats and dishonored scratching posts. My husband wasn't merely posting jokes, he was building mythology. But here's the kicker. The audience had taken sides. Some users wore their allegiance proudly. Team Whiskers, avatars, banners, little whisker emojis in their bios. Others swore loyalty to Pounce-a-Lot, praising his nobility, his vision for a fair feline world. There were even artists who drew fan comics of their battles. One I found had Mr. Whiskers crouched like a general on a windowsill, tail flicking, while Sir Pounce-a-Lot raised a paw like a knight preparing for a duel. It should have been funny. It was funny, objectively. But at 3 a.m, blurry-eyed and overwhelmed, it felt like betrayal on top of betrayal. Because the more I read, the more I saw something in my husband I'd never seen before. Passion, drive, creativity. Where was this fire when I asked him to help plan our anniversary? Where was this poetic wit when I begged him to write something meaningful in my birthday card instead of "love you, babe"? Instead, he was pouring all of himself into this. Into Mr. Whiskers. Into battling Sir Pounce-a-Lot like some kind of furry Hamilton-Burr rivalry. And then, in the middle of one heated exchange, I saw a line that made my throat tighten. Mr. Whiskers wrote, "Let them come. I have nothing left to lose, only territory to gain." It hit me harder than I expected. Nothing left to lose? Was that him? My husband? Was that a joke? Or was it a truth buried in cat metaphors? I sat back, the glow of the screen washing over me, my hands trembling. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was something else, something deeper. And as much as I hated to admit it, part of me was jealous. Not of Sir Pounce-a-Lot, not exactly. But of the fact that this world, these battles, these people, got a version of my husband that I never saw. I closed the laptop with a snap, my chest tight, my head pounding. For the first time, I wasn't just disturbed or betrayed. I was angry. Because suddenly, I wanted to claw my way into this world too. Not to watch from the sidelines, but to fight. I tried to act normal the next morning. I really did. I poured the coffee, buttered the toast, even asked him about work like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was vibrating like a live wire, because every time he spoke, every time his lips moved, all I heard was Mr. Whiskers. When he said, "Pass the sugar," I imagined him typing, "The human dares to ration my sweet sustenance. Rebellion brews." When he hummed along to the radio, I heard, "A wretched tune from my human servant. My ears demand vengeance." It was unbearable. Finally, I snapped. "So," I said, far too casually, "how's Mr. Whiskers doing these days?" The way his face drained of color told me everything. He didn't even try to pretend, didn't laugh it off, didn't feign confusion. He just sighed, like a man caught sneaking out of church in the middle of a sermon. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," he muttered. "Like this?" My voice cracked. "What do you mean, like this?" "You've been living a whole second life as a cat for 3 years? What exactly was the right way for me to find out? A press release? A dramatic reveal where you knock a glass off the counter and hiss at me?" He winced, rubbing his forehead. "It's not what you think." "Oh, isn't it?" I shot back. "Because what I think is that my husband has thousands of internet followers who worship him as some kind of feline overlord, and somehow, not once, did he think to mention it to his wife's silence." The clock ticked. Our cat, oblivious, licked herself on the rug. Finally, he said, "It started as a joke. During lockdown, I was bored. I made a post as if I were our cat. People liked it. I kept going. It made me feel good. Like I was part of something." His voice cracked on that last part. And for a second, my anger wavered. Because I recognized that tone, the raw, vulnerable one he almost never let slip. But then, I remembered the fan fiction. The battles. The way he'd poured his wit and passion into Mr. Whiskers, while I was lucky if I got a distracted "love you" when he hung up the phone. "Part of something," I repeated, my voice sharp. "And what am I then? Just background noise in the Mr. Whiskers cinematic universe?" He looked at me then, really looked, and for once he didn't have a witty comeback. His eyes were tired, sad. "I didn't mean to shut you out," he said softly. I didn't think you'd understand." That hurt more than anything, because maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't understand. But wasn't that the point of marriage? To try to understand each other, even when it's ridiculous, even when it's hard? I wanted to scream, to cry, to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Instead, I pushed back from the table, my chair screeching against the floor. "I need air," I said, my voice flat. I grabbed my coat and left before he could answer. Outside, the winter air bit at my cheeks, sharp and punishing. I walked aimlessly, my thoughts spiraling. Divorce felt too dramatic. Ignoring it felt impossible. And somewhere between the coffee shop and the park, a wild, dangerous idea began to form. If he had Mr. Whiskers, maybe I could have someone too. Not a rival in real life, but online. A new cat. A challenger. Maybe the only way to truly understand what he'd built was to step into the arena myself. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps, like water through cracks, finding every weak spot, every unspoken doubt you didn't know you had. For days after the confrontation, I couldn't look at him the same way. Every time he smiled, I wondered if he was already imagining how Mr. Whiskers would phrase it. Every time he checked his phone, I swore I saw a flash of guilt cross his face, as if he were itching to check for notifications to see if Sir Pounce-a-Lot had struck again. And me? I was spiraling. I'd sit on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage. Was he already Mr. Whiskers when we celebrated our anniversary in that overpriced restaurant? Was he composing cat metaphors in his head while I poured my heart out about wanting kids someday? Did he think of me as just another human servant in his secret empire? The disgust came in waves. Sharp, bitter. How dare he give the best of himself, his wit, his creativity, his passion, to strangers online while leaving me scraps? But then the doubt crept in, just as sharp. Was I overreacting? Was it really betrayal? He hadn't cheated. He hadn't gambled away our savings or lied about something dangerous. He'd roleplayed as a cat on Reddit. I laughed once bitterly in the middle of the night, thinking how absurd it sounded. Why are you divorcing your husband? Because he's secretly a famous cat online. No court would take me seriously. And yet, the ache in my chest was real. The distance between us was real. I started avoiding him. I'd linger in the bedroom while he made dinner, pretend to be busy on my phone instead of watching a movie together. He noticed, of course. He kept asking, "Are we okay?" in that nervous, boyish way he had when he knew he'd messed up. And I'd say, "I'm fine." Because what else could I say? I'm jealous of your cat alter ego? But deep down, something else was forming. A hunger. A curiosity. Late at night, when he was asleep, I'd sneak back to his laptop, scroll through more of Mr. Whiskers' posts, and every time I read one, the same thought wormed its way into my mind. I could do this. I could create my own account, my own persona, a cat with claws sharper than his, with wit just as sharp. I could step into his world, not as his wife, not as a bystander, but as a rival. The thought thrilled me. It terrified me. Because what would that mean? To become part of his secret universe? To fight him in the only place he truly came alive? Some nights, the disgust won. I'd shut the laptop, swearing never to stoop so low. This isn't who I am. I have dignity. I'm not going to meow at strangers on the internet just to prove a point. But then, inevitably, the doubt returned. And with it, the temptation. Because maybe, just maybe, the only way to claw him back to me was to meet him where he lived. Even if that place had whiskers and claws. There's a moment right before you do something you know is both ridiculous and inevitable. It's the beat between inhale and exhale when your brain yells don't, and your heart quietly, mischievously says, do it. I stood in that moment for a long, trembling minute, staring at the blank sign-up page on Reddit like it was a dare. Creating an account felt like tricking myself into a different skin. How could I, a woman who balanced bills and grocery lists and half-finished novels, suddenly become someone who prowled comment sections at midnight pretending to be a cat? And yet the part of me that had been hollowed out by months of secrets and small silences hummed with possibility. This was less about tricking him and more about finding a foothold in the place he had retreated to. I told myself rules. Don't be cruel. Don't stalk. Don't reveal your identity. Don't be obvious. Sounds sane, right? But the moment I typed the username, my palms sweated. I wanted something sharp, a name that would sting in his memory. Not childish, not petty. Something with bite. After a ridiculous internal debate, Duchess Furrington was too on the nose. Claudia felt like a cat who'd had too many personality exercises. I settled on Madame Mischief, equal parts mischief and menace. A cat who wore scandal-like perfume. A cat who would not go quietly. The profile photo was a quick mock-up. A calico silhouette against a crescent moon, eyes like coins. I wrote a short bio in the voice I imagined would irk him. Loves sunbeams, hisses at injustice, steals hearts and socks. Not here for your diplomacy, only the drama. It felt absurd and delicious at the same time. My first post was the hardest. How do you introduce a character into an already established mythos without making it sound like a poorly timed mic drop? I typed, erased, typed again. Finally, a sunbeam is a promise, and I will take mine. Who dares sit on my sill? The response was instant. A couple of upvotes, one amused comment. Who's this new calico? Bold entry. I felt my pulse spike. I wrote another, smaller, sharper. To the brute who calls himself Whiskers, the balcony is not your throne. Consider this a formal paw-to-paw challenge. My fingers hovered over the post button like a hand over a fuse. I hit submit. For a full minute, nothing happened. Then the notifications came like the first peal of a bell. Someone replied with a gif of a cat indignantly swatting a plant. Another user asked if I was new to the thread. And then, like lightning, there it was. A reply from Mr. Whiskers himself. Ah, it read in that unmistakable voice. A new scent on the breeze. Bold of you to announce yourself, little calico. Prove you have claws. I felt something in my chest unclench and then clench again. The board lit up, users rallied, Some cheered me on, others warned me I was stepping into an established war. The thrill was immediate, electric, intoxicating. And then guilt arrived, soft and insistent. I sat back, the laptop cooling under my hands, and pictured him, my husband, probably down the hall, making a sandwich, oblivious that his real life and his fantasy were colliding under my fingers. Had I crossed a line? Or had I finally found one I could stand on? I told myself it was research, an attempt to understand him, to see where he went when he disappeared from me. But even as I justified it, a small, feral part of me rejoiced. I had a presence now. I had voice. I had a weapon that was strangely playful, sarcasm disguised as Whiskers. The next reply from Mr. Whiskers was waiting, and the thread had already gathered a small crowd. My heart hammered with a cocktail of dread and exhilaration. I had entered the arena. There was no turning back. I typed my answer. Fingers steady now. The game had begun. I told myself the novelty would wear off, that after the first rush of adrenaline, after the tiny avalanches of upvotes and playful taunts, I'd close the laptop, take a breath, and go back to being the sensible wife who manages the bills and buys the cat food. Instead, the opposite happened. The more Mr. Whiskers replied, the more the thread swelled, the more my fingers itched to answer. Madame Mischief had a mouth now, and she was hungry. The community began to notice patterns. I learned their rhythms. The times of day, a battle would spike. The little private jokes that folded into every comment, the users who always stoked flame and the ones who tried to be referees. It was like learning a language, the cadence of muse and the grammar of gifs. I felt ridiculous and brilliant at once. Mr. Whiskers was a seasoned performer. He had a pace and a rhetorical flourish that made people laugh out loud. He could turn a minor inconvenience into a monologue about honor, or a spilled milk bowl into a tragedy that read like a Shakespearean aside. I made a mental list of his habits, how he baited with sarcasm, how he always let his guard drop for a vulnerable line when it mattered. I began to mirror him, not to copy, but to complement. Sharp retorts followed by a sly vulnerability. It was a dance, and I learned the steps fast. The first time we really sparred felt like stepping into cold water. He posted about a sunbeam that someone else had occupied, an echo of 1,000 staged fights. I answered with a small provocation. You call yourself a sovereign? Try holding the sill when the neighbor's tabby moves in. Leadership requires more than posturing. It was petty, theatrical, and utterly satisfying. His reply was immediate. Madam Mischief, you file heat like hunted pastry. Beware the claws that respond. He was amused. The thread lit up, users choosing sides like football fans. Someone made a crude banner, Team Mischief with a tiny drawn paw. Someone else posted a gif of a cat in a tiny crown. I felt the corner of my mouth lift. A ridiculous, small, triumphant smile. That unmoored version of me that had been missing for months. But the thrill came with a new ache I hadn't expected. Every flirty barb I read in his voice, every vulnerable aside wrapped in whimsy, struck me differently now. Because I knew the man behind it. At the grocery store, he looked like any other husband buying milk. Online, he was dramatic and dangerous and incandescent. I wanted to slap him and hug him at once. He never suspected, not yet. He'd asked cautiously if I would ever want to be part of it. I had deflected, said something vague about it being silly. Even then, he had not pressed. The knowledge felt heavy in my chest, this secret that was both mine now and not mine. I typed carefully, balancing on the edge of exposure and concealment. I couldn't bear the thought of him knowing instantly. I wanted to see how he treated this rival in public. I wanted to see his true colors, unfiltered by the intimacy of our bedroom. As Madame Mischief, I learned to wield curiosity like a blade. I dropped breadcrumbs, little hints that might prod him into revealing more. A comment about an old scar on my character's paw. A throwaway line about preferring the company of solitary queens. He took each line and widened it into a story. He shared a memory, small and tender, about a childhood cat that had taught him to love the quiet. I read it, and something unfamiliar and furious unfurled. He had given strangers pieces of himself in ways he never had to me. The thread's drama spiraled. A mock duel was proposed, an exchange of creative posts where each cat would narrate a faux battle. Fans voted. The moderators set rules. It was ridiculous and canonical and exactly what he lived for. When the date came, my palms shook like a tremor. I crafted a piece that tasted of moonlight and menace. A vignette about a calico who stole the last warm patch of carpet at dawn. He answered with a soliloquy about honor and upkeep. The comments exploded with applause. By the end, I felt both triumphant and empty. I had been fierce where I'd felt powerless in our marriage, but the fierceness came at a cost. I realized I was changing in small, dangerous increments into someone who needed the applause to feel whole. That night, I closed the laptop with shaking hands. On the hallway table, his keys lay like small, ordinary punctuation marks of a life that now felt divided into two languages. I listened as he moved in the next room, heard the scrape of a chair, the low mutter of a podcast. I imagined him, wherever he was, composing a line in the voice I had come to both love and resent. I put my head in my hands and laughed, quiet and sharp, because nothing about this felt sane. And yet, for the first time in months, I felt visible. Madame Mischief had claws, and the world had noticed. The question that hummed at the back of my skull, like a persistent moth to a porch light, was simple and dangerous. What happens when the rival is the wife? It started innocently enough. A comment here, a playful jab there. But the moment Mr. Whiskers saw Madame Mischief as a real rival, the tone shifted. The thread became an arena, the kind of digital coliseum where claws and wit were the only weapons. And I, sitting at my desk in sweatpants, felt my heart hammer like a war drum. He opened with a post dripping with bravado. The balcony is mine. Every sunbeam, every dust mote, every crumb of dignity belongs to Whiskers. Challenge at your own peril. I read it, smiled, and responded, Mighty tyrant, consider this paw officially raised. The carpet, the sill, even the unguarded windows are mine to conquer. Your reign ends in 3 meows. The community erupted. Users took sides. GIFs of swatting paws, tiny drawn crowns, even a fake medieval map of the living room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, intoxicated by the chaos we had created. It was thrilling and terrifying. I realized with a jolt, I was no longer watching. I was inside. Madame Mischief wasn't just a persona. She was a presence, and she demanded attention. Mr. Whiskers responded with the precision of a general. Bold calico. You step where elders tread. Do you truly know the cost of defying Whiskers? I laughed aloud, startling our actual cat, who shot me a look that seemed judgmental. I typed, I know the cost, and yet I take it gladly. Beware, old warrior. Claws sharpen in shadows, and mischief waits for no one. Each post escalated. The duel became a series of elaborate narratives. Midnight raids on windowsills, stolen treats staged as tactical maneuvers, allegiances formed and betrayed. The thread became our battlefield, but also our confessional. I discovered lines of vulnerability in him that were hidden in the prose, brief admissions about loneliness, nostalgia, and little joys that he never shared with me. And I, through Madame Mischief, revealed a cunning and audacity I didn't know I possessed. The tension grew. He escalated too, not in cruelty, but in challenge. Our fights were threaded with humor, wit, and strategy. Yet, underneath the playfulness was something raw and electric. The adrenaline that surged through me wasn't just about winning, it was about being seen by him in a way I hadn't been in years. Late at night, I found myself trembling as I typed. Each post was a wager. Would he recognize me? Would he feel the shift in tone, the subtle familiarity of my voice wrapped in feline metaphor? I was playing a dangerous game. At some point, I realized our war had drawn the attention of other community members. Users speculated about the true identities behind the cats. Some joked about a secret love story, others predicted betrayals, alliances, or even a fanfiction romance. I bit my lip and typed a post that was deliberately ambiguous. Alliances shift like shadows. Even the boldest paw can stumble in the dark. He replied instantly, in that unmistakable voice that only months of observation could teach me to recognize. Madame Mischief. Something familiar hides behind your meows. Are you friend, foe, or something else entirely? My pulse spiked. My stomach tightened. For the first time, I saw his suspicion rise like a tide. I had to be careful now. Every keystroke could give me away. And yet, the thrill of it, the closeness, the secret dance, the electric knowledge that he didn't know it was me, was overwhelming. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers hovering. Our duel had begun in jest, but it had become real. The line between play and obsession blurred. I wasn't just Madame Mischief anymore. I was the wife in the shadows, the rival who had stepped into his world. And suddenly, the stakes were no longer just online, because I knew that eventually he would figure it out. And when he did, everything would change. The first hint that I might have been discovered came like a whisper in a hurricane. One evening, I logged in to post a playful jab at Mr. Whiskers, and his reply made my heart seize. Your paw moves like someone I know too well. Who are you, Calico? Dare I ask the human behind the whiskers? I froze. My hands hovered over the keyboard. The thrill that had fueled me for weeks now twisted into something sharp, like a claw pressing into my ribs. Could he actually suspect me? Could he know? I reread the reply a dozen times. Each word felt deliberate, calculated, teasing, but with an edge I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just curiosity, it was recognition. My husband was seeing through the veil. My mind raced. I imagined him, pacing in our kitchen, laptop open, brow furrowed, thinking through the cadence of my lines, my humor, the timing of my little provocations. I could practically hear him whispering, "She's not just anyone. She's her." I wanted to log off, to step away, to disappear from this battlefield before he could corner me. And yet, a more dangerous impulse burned inside me. To stay. To play. To see how far this dance could go before the revelation came crashing down. The next exchange was careful, electric. He baited me with vulnerability. "You speak of moonlight and shadows with such precision. You've watched too closely, Calico." Too closely, I bit back a gasp. His words carried the weight of intimacy I hadn't felt in months. My pulse pounded in my ears. Every part of me wanted to confess, to throw back the veil and reveal that Madame Mischief had paws that were, in fact, human and married to him. But another part, the part that had been starved for recognition and excitement, wanted to push further, to test him, to see if the man I loved in real life could be challenged, intrigued, even unsettled by me online. I replied carefully, teasing, never giving too much away. Shadows have their own lives. Sometimes they watch more than we realize. He didn't respond immediately. That delay, the silence, was torture. I checked the thread obsessively, heart leaping with every notification. Then finally, a single line appeared. "Interesting. Very interesting. You may yet prove to be the most cunning rival I've faced." My stomach tightened. That very interesting sounded like suspicion, like recognition flirting at the edges of consciousness. I realized I was dancing on a knife's edge. One misstep, one too familiar phrase, and he would see me. And I was terrified. Because what would happen then? Would he laugh and forgive me? Or would he feel betrayed? Again, but this time with evidence I had deliberately placed in front of him. Would our playful war of Whiskers end with him shutting me out entirely, retreating into Mr. Whiskers' world, leaving me standing alone in the shadows I had chosen? I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't log off. The pull of this clandestine duel was stronger than fear, stronger than reason. Every post, every sly remark, every feint was a rush. I had entered the arena willingly, and I would not leave until he either knew or I had proven myself. The line between play and truth blurred further with each interaction. I found myself reading his replies, not just as Mr. Whiskers, but as my husband, the man whose quirks I had adored, whose secret life I had envied, whose mind I was now trying to map through words and metaphors. And then it hit me. Maybe he already knew. Maybe he had suspected from the first post. Maybe the thrill of our duel wasn't just in the cat world. It was in us, finally meeting in a place where both of our masks could slip. My heart hammered. I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. The war wasn't over. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't be just a duel. It would be everything. I couldn't sleep. The thread was quiet, but my mind roared. The tension between us, between Mr. Whiskers and Madame Mischief, between husband and wife, had reached a boiling point. Every time I imagined him realizing the truth, my chest tightened. Every time I imagined the duel ending, I feared both loss and revelation. Finally, I logged in. One last post. Not a jab, not a provocation. Just words that carried everything I hadn't said in months. All battles end. Even those fought with claws and mischief. Perhaps it's time to see the human behind the whiskers. I hit submit. My hands shook. And then silence. Minutes stretched. Then a ping. I had a feeling. I just didn't want to believe it. Or maybe I did. "Madame Mischief, is it really you?" My heart lurched. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. Finally, I wrote, "Yes, it was me. The rival, the calico, the chaos. I wanted to understand you, to meet you in your world. And I didn't know how else." The reply came almost instantly. "I can't believe it. And yet, I should have known. You've always been clever enough to find your way into every corner of my life, even the ones I tried to hide. So, what now?" I stared at the screen. The question echoed in my mind. What now? I thought about divorce, about walking away, about never touching the absurd world of internet cat duels again, but the truth was glaring and undeniable. Leaving would mean losing him, both versions of him. The playful, imaginative Mr. Whiskers, the man who hummed in the kitchen, the man I loved. Instead, I typed, "We compromise." Claws aside, but with mischief intact. No more secrets, unless it's a game we play together. His response came in a heartbeat. I like the sound of that. Perhaps it's time we redefine territory together. You, me, and the cats. And maybe the balcony too. I laughed aloud. Not the sharp, bitter laugh of before. Not the tremulous laugh of fear and confusion. A full, real laugh. The one that reaches your bones and clears your chest. We spent that night talking, not about Mr. Whiskers or Madam Mischief, but about us. About the gaps that had formed, the unspoken needs, the curiosities we'd ignored. We talked about laughter, secrets, and yes, even cat metaphors. By morning, the world felt lighter. The thread still waited, but it no longer felt like a battlefield. It was a playground, and we would play in it together. I realized something fundamental. Marriage isn't about perfection, secrecy, or even sanity. It's about connection, about being seen and seeing the other person in all their absurdity and brilliance, about loving them, even when they are secretly a British shorthair, or when you are a mischievous calico who has to test him in battle. I leaned back in my chair, smiling. We had claws, we had mischief. But now, we had each other. And somehow, that was enough. Love can be weird, messy, and even a little furry, but the right person will meet you in your weirdness. Stay curious, stay playful, and embrace the mischief. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe and leave a comment. What would you do if your partner had a secret cat persona?